Hi, I'm doing a couple of videos about the history of animism, but I'm going to start out with sort of what happens when a culture forgets the history of their animistic tradition and becomes sort of what sometimes people call a broken tradition. So, this is where it's very hard to go to elders like you would in a living tradition. And if you have a question, ask them the question. You don't, you may or may not grow up from a young child learning about the cosmology and all the different spirits and the different rituals because so much of it's lost, or there are missing pieces of ritual or even of how the universe works together, the cosmology that are missing. And so, kind of, what do you do? So, my sort of introduction to this was when I went on a shamanic journey and met a spirit helper from a broken tradition who told me that because I had had previous contact with living traditions, that this broken tradition that I was now learning was just as vivid, and the spirits were every bit as real as the ones in a living tradition. That's not what was broken. So for me, that meant that that I was going to need to get the kind of advice that you would get from elders in a different way, to have ritual safety and to be as effective as I could be. So that meant really being fortunate to find traditional practitioners, I mean, within this broken tradition, who were very experienced and who had, been doing this for a lot longer than me. It meant trying to learn as much as I could about the cosmology, as much as, which I'm obviously still in a process of doing and probably will be for many, many years. It meant also, since I'm not from that country where this tradition comes from, learning from people who practice the folklore from that region, people who were anthropologists who study that culture, shamanic practitioners who work with those traditions, people who are into folk magic from that culture, and even other types of scholars from that area of the world. Just trying to bring together the missing pieces that I couldn't get by just going to an elder, like I could in some of the traditions that I was fortunate enough to learn about. And this was a tradition that had to do with my blood ancestors. I should not forget that part. So mainly the reason I was doing this is because I wanted to understand how safety works in that tradition, and also when I was fortunate to be introduced to similar traditions that were more living. In other words, with people with a very well remembered cosmology, system of rituals, elders, all of that, teaching spirits that come from that tradition, very powerful practices. I was able to sort of it would help me to understand the missing pieces in the broken tradition, like how I might be able to relate that a little bit better to this living tradition, and then back again, so that it kind of filled in the gaps a little bit spiritually and energetically. So it was more safe, more powerful, more workable, things like that. And so, and also helped me to understand the cosmology a little better. So it didn't just seem like, why are these people believing the things that they believe? Well, it's because they're related to other people who still believe those things. So even though, my ancestors stopped believing those things, it's not like all people everywhere stopped believing in them. So that was very helpful. So I think that animism is very dependent on not just traditions and folklore and spirits and working with nature, but also with the human element of elders and remembering, and being able to innovate based on that remembering, and being able also to go outside of your ancestral tradition or whatever tradition that you're in and learn from somebody else and maybe bring a little bit of that back in. So next time I'll talk a little bit about the history of animism, that as far as I know of it, and how that impacts, I think, us today trying to reclaim it.